The envelope sat on the kitchen counter for exactly 4 minutes before she picked it up. I know because I was watching the clock. I'd spent 9 months preparing what was inside it. 9 months of silence. 9 months of getting up every morning, and making coffee, and driving to work, and coming home for dinner, and helping with homework. Acting like the man she thought she had completely figured out. 9 months of knowing something that changed everything, and saying nothing. The day I handed her that envelope, I didn't say a word. I just put it on the counter, and sat down at the kitchen table, and waited. And when she opened it, and pulled out the papers, and saw what was inside, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not guilt, not panic, something quieter than that. Something that looked almost like the moment a person realizes the ground beneath them isn't solid anymore. I said, "Take your time reading it." Then I picked up my coffee and I waited. My name is Ryan, and the 9 months between the day I found out and the day I handed her that envelope are the most important months of my life. Not because of what I lost, because of what I learned about myself, when everything I thought I had turned out to be something different than what it was. I grew up in a small city in Tennessee. My father was a contractor. My mother taught at the local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we were solid. The kind of family where dinner was on the table every night, and your word meant something, and you built things that lasted. I met my wife, I'm going to call her Vanessa, at 26. She was 24, working in marketing, funny and smart and genuinely charming. The kind of charming where it doesn't feel like performance. Because it isn't. We dated for 2 years. We got married when I was 28. We bought a house at 30. We had our first child, a daughter named Emma, at 31. Our second child, a son named Tyler, at 33. Our third child, another daughter named Claire, at 35. For 11 years I was a husband and a father, and I was good at both. Not perfect, but present and committed and genuinely invested. I coached Tyler's soccer team on Saturdays. I read to Claire every night until she was old enough to read herself. I took Emma to her dance recitals, and sat in the front row with my phone out taking video, and I didn't care who saw me doing it. That was my life. That was what I thought I had. The thing that started it was small. A comment made at a family barbecue by my Uncle Dave, who is 72 years old, and who has never said anything with the intention of causing harm. He was watching Tyler kick a soccer ball in the backyard, and he said, "That boy looks more like your brother every year." My brother was standing 10 feet away. I looked at Tyler. I looked at my brother, and I felt something move through me that I didn't have a name for. I didn't act on it that day. I told myself Dave was just an old man saying old man things. I told myself Tyler looked like Tyler. I told myself a lot of things over the following 3 weeks. And during those 3 weeks, I paid a specific and uncomfortable kind of attention to my children that I am not proud of. What I saw when I paid that attention was not proof of anything. It was the absence of certainty. And the absence of certainty, once it has taken root, does not go away on its own. I ordered the DNA test kits online. They're available, they're discreet, and the process is simpler than it should probably be. I tested all 3 kids, not because I had specific reason to doubt all 3, because if I was going to do this, I was going to do it completely. That's the kind of man I am. When I open a door, I walk through it all the way. The results came back on a Thursday afternoon. I was alone in the house. Vanessa was at work. The kids were at school. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eventually put that envelope, and I opened the results on my laptop. Emma was mine. Tyler was not. Claire was not. I sat there for a long time. The house was very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a lawnmower somewhere down the street. I sat there until the lawnmower stopped, and the street got quiet again. And then I sat there some more. Then I closed the laptop, and went to the bathroom, and turned the shower on. I sat down on the floor of the shower, with my back against the wall, and I let the water run until it went cold. I cried exactly once. That afternoon, on that shower floor, I made myself a promise when I was done. What happened next was going to be handled with the same care and precision I brought to everything else in my life. I was not going to blow up. I was not going to confront her in a moment of emotion that she could use against me. I was going to think, I was going to plan, and I was going to make sure that when this was over, Emma was going to be okay. Everything I did in the 9 months that followed was for Emma. I called an attorney the following Monday. Not a friend, not someone who knew us socially. A family law attorney 40 minutes away. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she was one of the sharpest people I've ever sat across a table from. I told her everything on the first meeting. I showed her the DNA results. I told her I needed to understand my options completely before I did anything else. Patricia was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then she said, "Okay, let's talk about what this means and what we can do about it." Here is what I knew about our financial situation. We had a house worth approximately $380,000, with a mortgage balance of about $90,000. We had 2 investment properties, a rental house I purchased before we were married, and a commercial unit acquired during our marriage. We had retirement accounts. We had savings. We had a joint business account connected to a small side business Vanessa ran. Patricia explained the legal landscape clearly. Assets acquired before marriage remain separate property. Assets acquired during marriage are generally marital property subject to division. The complication and the opportunity was in the details of how things had been structured and documented over the years. The rental house I purchased before the marriage was clearly my separate property. The commercial unit was more complicated because marital funds had been used in its acquisition. What Patricia helped me understand was that the contribution of separate funds could be traced. I had records. I always have records, because I am the kind of man who keeps records. We brought in a forensic accountant. His name was Richard, and he was meticulous in a way that I recognized and respected. He spent 6 weeks going through 12 years of financial records. What he found was documented in a report that became one of the most important documents in what came later. The harder work was the other kind. Every morning getting up and making coffee, and sitting across the breakfast table from a woman I'd been married to for 11 years, while carrying what I knew. Every time I watched Tyler at soccer practice, or held Claire's hand crossing a parking lot, feeling the specific complexity of loving someone whose origin story had changed. Tyler and Claire are my children. I want to be absolutely clear about that. DNA is biology. Fatherhood is what you do every day for 11 years. The question of what to do about Tyler and Claire was the hardest question of those 9 months. I thought about it more than any other. I began seeing a therapist in month 3 because I needed to talk to someone who wasn't involved. What I decided was that my relationship with those 2 kids was going to be determined by me, not by biology, not by what Vanessa had done. There was a man. There always is. I didn't hire a private investigator. I paid a different kind of attention to Vanessa's patterns. Over those 9 months, I had 11 years of knowing this woman. I knew how she operated. What I saw pointed to someone in her professional orbit who had been there for most of our marriage. The envelope came together in month 9. Patricia had reviewed everything. The forensic accountant's report was complete. The asset documentation was in order. And at the front of the envelope, the first thing Vanessa would see were the DNA results. All 3. Names clearly identified. Percentages that said everything, without a single additional word from me. I put it on the kitchen counter on a Saturday morning in August. The kids were at my parents' house. Vanessa was making coffee. I came in, set the envelope on the counter, and sat down at the table. She looked at it. She looked at me. She picked it up. She read it the way people read things they are afraid of. Fast at first, then slow, then back to the beginning. When she put the papers down, her hands were not entirely steady. She said, "Ryan." I said, "I know." She said, "I can explain." I said, "You don't have to." She said, "The kids." I said, "The kids are my kids. That's not changing." She started to cry. I felt something complicated watching that. I am not going to simplify it for the sake of a cleaner story. What I will tell you is that it didn't change anything. My decisions had been made before this moment, not in it. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. Vanessa hired a very good attorney. I had Patricia, who was better. The financial outcome reflected the documentation Richard had assembled, and Patricia had built the case around. I have primary custody of all 3 kids. Emma is 15 now. Tyler is 13. Claire is 11. They're doing well. Not perfectly, but we see a family therapist. We talk. I show up every day. The morning after I handed her the envelope, I woke before 6, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, looked out at the backyard where Tyler had kicked a soccer ball, and Emma had strung lights for her 14th birthday party. What I felt was not triumph, something closer to the exhaustion that comes after a long, difficult job is done, and something else I hadn't expected. Clarity, like the fog that had lived in my chest for 9 months had lifted, and what was underneath it was just me, still standing. The things that get taken from you, the trust, the version of your life you thought you had, those things being gone doesn't mean you're gone. You're still there, underneath all of it, still exactly who you were. And who you are is the only thing nobody can take. I spent 9 months being the most disciplined version of myself I have ever been. I did it for Emma. I did it for Tyler and Claire. And somewhere in those 9 months, without planning to, I did it for myself too. If you're going through something like this, don't blow up. Don't act in the moment. Think. Plan. Get good people around you. And remember that the most powerful thing you can be is the person in the room who already knows everything and has already decided what comes next. My name is Ryan. She had 9 months to tell me the truth. I used those same 9 months more carefully than she knew. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to hold something difficult in silence while you figured out your next move. I want to hear your story. Subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.